The weather's getting colder. I had a little frost on my North Carolina lawn this week. That means hoop season nearly here. And with that, the return of hopefully your favorite women's college basketball podcast. Year 3 of the Gauer Hour fully underway. I'm Rob Joyce. I'm just some guy to whom they gave a microphone. I'm joined by the woman who knows everything about everything, our resident bracketologist, Megan Gauer. Megan, hello. How was summer? How are you?
Summer was great. The off season was great. I would say, slowly getting ready for the season. It feels like it snuck up on us a little bit.
Paris for the Olympics. I have questions.
Yes.
Did you learn French?
No.
I assume, it's the Olympics, so you get away with speaking English everywhere.
Yeah.
Okay.
Much.
Favorite thing you ate?
Ooh. I don't know. I feel like French food isn't my favorite cuisine. All the food was good, but nothing was spectacular. I don't know. Probably
Fries,
seafood.
Toast.
Yeah.
French.
Yeah. The croissants are great, obviously, but
this is a stupid question. How do tickets work? Can you just stroll? If I want to, like basketball might be a little different. If I just want to stroll and watch some sumo wrestling at noon on a Tuesday, can I just stroll in?
Not really. So we got tickets for the Olympics literally 2 years ago. It was that early of a process. And there's some stuff that pops up that's available for day of or couple days before, but there's not a whole lot of inventory out there.
So this is like Ticketmaster. You got to get in, do
Yeah.
your thing, and that's it. Okay. Were you in the building for the gold medal game?
I was not. We left before the gold medal games, unfortunately, for both basketball and for soccer.
Well, Gabby Williams is an alien, but
yeah,
not quite enough to beat USA 1-on-5. If you're new, well, thanks for tuning in. We'll do this each week now through the Final Four, so we're extending our podcast instead of joining up in January every Friday. If you're returning, what's new for this year? The full season. And if you probably know this, if you're watching, run video. Congrats, Megan. Smile. Smile.
Yeah,
on top of listening
to not look miserable at all.
Yes, on top of listening to us get things wrong, you can now watch us get things wrong. Loaded show for you today. First chance to talk before action comes to life on Monday. We'll talk about all the power conferences. We'll hit on all the major teams, the players. Want to start kind of by pigeonholing ourselves. Instead of pigeonholing ourselves into a certain conference per se, gave Megan a little homework. 5 storylines, the 5 biggest in her opinion heading into this season. So, Megan, the floor is yours. We'll start if you want to go 5-1, 1-5. You tell us where to start, and we'll go from there.
We'll go 1-5 because it feels like we should absolutely be opening up this podcast talking about South Carolina, and obviously undefeated national champions last year. They're starting preseason poll back in that number 1 spot, as they should. And I think they still are the clear number 1 team going into this season, but they might be a little bit more vulnerable than they are last year. They returned basically everyone, but that basically everyone excludes Camila Cardoso, which is a big loss for them. And they really don't have that star going into this season.
Which they didn't last year. Cardoso was a top 10 pick. She was borderline All-American. They have 5 people who, if they were on any other team but South Carolina,
right,
their stats would go way up. They'd be All-American. So the talent's obviously there. I thought it went from Asia Wilson, gap year, Aaliyah Boston, and then right behind Boston, you had Cardoso. And then last year was Cardoso, right behind her, Ashlyn Watkins. And I figured this year would be Watkins, right behind her is Joyce Edwards. And that could still be the case. Elephant in the room. We're not lawyers. We don't know anything about the Ashlyn Watkins thing other than what's been reported. She hasn't been involved in team activities. Wouldn't expect her whenever South Carolina opens, Monday, Tuesday, whenever they open. Probably expect her this year. Don't know. That's it's obviously a big asterisk because I think you're right. With her, clear-cut number 1, might go, I don't know if they'd go undefeated again, but they're going to be national title favorites, 1-2 losses at most. Without her, they're still, all of those things are in play. You're just putting a lot of pressure on a very good, very highly touted freshman big in Joyce Edwards. You're putting a lot of pressure on a former 5-star in Miriam Dowda, who is talented, battled health issues at Arkansas. Chloe Kitts isn't quite the defensive force that Cardoso and Watkins were and are. So yeah, there's question marks there, and they may not be answered until we literally see her on the court.
Yeah, exactly. I think it's the first time there's been question marks in South Carolina's front court since maybe before Leah Boston played her first game. So it's a new thing for them. The
For
front
that
court
one
has
year when Asia Wilson wasn't there and Leah Boston
right.
had to. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So it hasn't been a theme for them in the past. I mean, obviously we would expect that Don Staley's going to figure it out, but it is a lot of pressure on a young player to step up in that front court. So I think that's going to be something to keep an eye on with them this year. Again, like you said, still fully in the question that they would repeat as national champions. They're still going to be a favorite going into that come March, I expect. But with Ashlyn Watkins kind of being uncertain at this point, there's a lot of questions there in the front court.
Now, in the backcourt, though, is this the best set of guards she's ever had? Raven Johnson, Tahina Pau, Malaysia Fulwiley, and don't forget what Tessa Johnson did come not just in the national championship game, but really March onward. And then Bree Hall started every game last year. That's an embarrassment of riches that they haven't necessarily had in the backcourt.
Yeah, there's a lot of depth there, and we've seen, I think, each individual that you just mentioned step up in big ways for them, and I think that's something that we hadn't seen, you're right, before for South Carolina. It had been kind of all about the front court, and maybe there's a little bit of a pivot this year to now it's really about this backcourt and the wealth of experience and talent that they have there.
Unbeaten again?
I don't think so. I think someone gets them at some point. It's really hard to repeat as undefeated national championships. That's not a knock to them. It's just like it's really hard to do that.
And I mean, kudos to, this is not just Dawn Staley, kudos to pretty much every women's college basketball coach, because as opposed to the men's game, the women aren't afraid to go play each other on campus.
Right.
South Carolina plays NC State. They're at UCLA. They play Iowa State and whatever MTE they're in November. They play Duke. And conference, you get Texas twice on the calendar. Home games against Oklahoma, LSU, UConn. There's a loss in there somewhere, I think, but one, maybe two. And again, that doesn't preclude South Carolina from being the national title contender, because, I mean, they're chasing history. Like 2 in the last 3. It's not unrealistic to think like there are a few bounces in a pandemic away from, in the last 5 years, winning 3, 4, if not all of them. Like it was them or Oregon in 2020. 21 was the missed layup against Stanford, right?
Yep.
They won in 22. They got Caitlin Clark. No. Yeah, they won in 22, right?
Yeah.
Then they got Caitlin Clark, and they won last year. That's not that far off.
Right.
Even more than they already have. So, yeah, they're chasing history. And if they didn't get Caitlin Clark, would we be looking at that 111 UConn win streak? That could have been in jeopardy. That 70-game win streak they had is in jeopardy going into this year. So South Carolina, the certain number one, with or without Watkins. Everyone else, minus Camila Cardoso, is back from last year's team. And they made a couple of nice additions as well, as South Carolina always does. What's number 2 on your storylines?
It feels like there's a very clear top tier going into this season, and obviously South Carolina at the top of that. But I think 4 or 5 other teams that are kind of seem to feel like they're kind of a head cut above the rest. And then I think it evens out really quickly. But you've got, and we'll talk about all of these teams in more detail later, but USC, UConn, UCLA, Notre Dame, Texas that have brought back significant talent and then also added significant talent.
So you ask, who plays their way into that group? Is there a team off the top of your head that you think, we don't have to go in depth right now, off the dome, could play their way into that group amongst the top 5, 6?
I don't think there's a clear-cut front runner. I think we're going to talk about Iowa State some later. I like them this year. They got bringing back a lot of talent, but that would probably be my first pick. But I don't know. It'll be interesting to see if anyone can do that.
If my pick would be NC State. Is there any one of that 6, South Carolina, USC, UConn, UCLA, Notre Dame, Texas, any one of those 6 that separates, that falls out of that top 5, 6?
Yeah, I think the 2 things that stand out to me here is that, Notre Dame, the front court, I think there's some question marks. So can they answer those questions? They brought in a bunch of pieces, so I think there's a lot of options there to make things work. But can they answer some of those questions? I think that held them back a little bit this year or last year. And then UCLA too, can they make a step forward from where they were last year? I think they were really good all of last year, but they couldn't quite make that past the Elite 8 type run. So can they take a step forward and really be a top team?
We can talk UCLA now. They're interesting because last year, you and I both had them in the Final Four in the preseason. And yeah, they were never bad last year by any stretch of the imagination. They were always in the top 5. But it never it always seemed like something was missing, right? Just I don't know what it was. They could have beaten anyone on any given day, but it just seemed that full power we expected competing with South Carolina, like they were just like a half step behind that. And it turned into that Sweet 16 loss to LSU. But no more Charisma Osborne, one of the best in program history. Hello, whenever she gets healthy, Charlize Ledger Walker. She tore her ACL in January at Washington State, so probably midseason you expect her back. Tamia Gardner, one of the Oregon State Exodus transfers, poor Beavers. And then they got Janiah Barker, who was an intriguing, highest ranked prospect in Texas A&M history. Transfers out, intriguing talent there to go with Kiki Rice, Lauren Betts. That's, if it all works, I mean, again, we're talking the same talent level of last year is as good as anyone in the country.
Yeah, exactly. The talent is there, so it's can they figure out whatever was missing last year and make that jump. I think part of that is can you figure out how to get Lauren Betts the ball more, because I think they struggled with that at times last year. But just something has to gel in the right way for them to make that jump, and I don't think we've seen that yet from this group.
Yeah, started 14-0 last year, finished 13-7. Now the Pac-12 brutal last year, so 13-7 still isn't terrible. They just couldn't hit the broadside of a barn either in the Sweet 16 against LSU. Here's a question: late in the game, they need a bucket. Who gets the ball? Like, they just need 2 points, don't need a 3. Feel like it should be Lauren Betts. I feel like the eye test backs that up, but for whatever reason, again, does she get the ball? Like, do the coaches choose to get her the ball? Because it's kind of 2 years in a row where it's just the Stanford thing was weird 2 years ago. Last year, she had that kind of mysterious, I think it was an illness, it turned out to be. I feel like it should be her that's like the go-to centerpiece, and I'm not sure it will be.
Yeah, it's a good question. I feel like it felt like at times from the eye test, especially last year, that should be like she was the best player on the floor. That should be the game plan, the end of the game. But it usually felt like it ended up falling to Osborne or Rice to really be the one to do that. So does Betts kind of, now that Osborne is gone and your veteran leader there is gone, is Betts step into that role, or I don't know, does she still, I don't know if shy away from it is right, because I don't know it's hers or the coach's decision, but it'll be interesting to see how that dynamic changes.
If we talk to UCLA, we might as well talk the other LA school who also loaded up in the portal. If UCLA was maybe 1B in the portal as a winner, USC is 1A. We all know, ever heard of Juju Watkins? She's a sophomore now. She's good. Of course, she had help last year in winning the Pac-12 tournament, made it to the Elite Eight. Rhea Marshall was chief among them. She's back. Now I think they've hit another level. Should be, in my opinion, the number 2 team in the country. Talia von Oelhoffen, another Oregon State transfer. Kiki Iriafen comes from Stanford. All the potential in the world. Plus, Lindsey Gottlieb brought in 3 top 20 recruits. They may have the most raw talent in the country. Now it's a matter of, can they overcome Juju? Sure, you can say she's an underclassman. She's different. Can they overcome 3 freshmen and just gelling all of this talent together?
Yeah, I think that's going to be the big thing for them. They're young in terms of there's a lot of freshmen on this roster, but you have so much talent with Juju, with Kiki Iriafen, especially those two are going to highlight that. And then you've got, Rhea Marshall, like we said, you've got the other additions. So I think all the talent is there. It's just, can it come together? And when does it come together? It's probably not going to come together in November, but it should come together by March.
This is being nitpicky, I feel like the floor, and this is the floor, is like an LSU type season where they were an overwhelming number 1 last year. And they should have been. They were the defending national champs. They brought in some high profile players out of the portal. This team is deeper than that LSU team was last year. But we all thought, LSU last year, oh my goodness, like runaway national championship favorites. And they never really were. Like from that first game, they lost in the Elite Eight, would turn out to be a disappointing season, but also seemed fitting. Is there any fear that von Oelhoffen can't gel with Juju, Iriafen, and Marshall can't work together, something like that? No. Now, mind you, the level of all that quote unquote disappointment was Elite Eight.
Yeah, exactly. It's not exactly a disappointing season for most programs.
Would a no Final Four though be disappointing for USC?
I don't think so, just because you're still gonna have more time with Juju. Like, it's only Juju's sophomore year. You just brought in all these other recruits. Like, I think Final Four is the expectation, but I think if they go out fighting in the Elite Eight, like, that's not a bad season, and they're going to be back and they're going to make it there with Juju.
Fair enough. Again, I was playing devil's advocate. I think they are the second best team in the country. And even if they don't maybe show it in November, come the new year when we get into the thick of Big Ten play. Big Ten play, baby. USC, UCLA. Get excited. Yeah, I think that they're going to prove to be the number 2 team behind South Carolina. Number 3 on your list is we'll talk about we already talked South Carolina. We'll talk UConn, Notre Dame, Texas, and all them. We will talk about all those teams later, but keep going down your list, Megan.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of the theme with those teams that we were just talking about is just they've got these duos. I think it's less about, last year was all about Caitlin Clark and the one star, but a lot of these teams that I think are going to be so good this year, it's a pair of players that are kind of at the forefront of that. We talked about right now Juju and Iriaf, and I mean Rice and Betts at UCLA, but then you've got the Olivia Miles and Hannah Hidalgo backcourt that's coming at Notre Dame. That's super exciting. Rory Harmon with Madison Booker at Texas as well. Both of those kind of veterans coming off of injuries, but the freshmen really stepped up last year, and now they get to play together. And then I feel like we've been trying to talk about this duo for many seasons at this point, and no one's been healthy, but hopefully a Becker's Fudd duo at UConn once Fudd gets back on the court. I think they're expecting her probably early December, so won't be long before she should be back out there.
We could have the UConn talk now because we're going to talk about all the Power 4 conferences. UConn, they're going to run away with the Big East again. Creighton's a top 20, top 25 team. Huskies are going to win the Big East regular season title. They're going to win the tournament title. Big East for a basketball conference. It's embarrassing how they treat half the women's basketball programs. Not getting into it. So UConn, number 2 team in the preseason in the AP poll. I am not that high on the Huskies. Make the argument for me, because if the argument is strictly they have Paige Beckers, like that's an argument that's good enough for me. I still don't think. I think they're closer to their 6th or 7th best in the country, and they're not number 2.
Interesting. Okay, I think like you could split hairs all day over if USC and UConn is number 2 or number 3, but I do think, I mean, a huge part of that argument is that they have Paige Beckers, because I think the level that we saw Paige at last year, she's clear preseason All-American. That's huge. But then I think it's what's around her in the backcourt too. If you're going to have AZ Fudd, a healthy AZ Fudd, like we've seen flashes of what AZ can do when she has been healthy. We haven't got to see it in a whole season. Hopefully you do this year. And then they add Caitlin Chen in that backcourt too, which I think is just a great portal add in terms of what UConn needs, an experienced point guard, a little bit of just veteran presence in what is a pretty young team. I think the big question mark obviously comes in the front court. No more Aaliyah Edwards. You've got a lot of talent, but not much experience. So I think that's going to be the thing that makes or breaks this team. There's been so much hype over Janet Al-Alfi, so I think a big part of the argument is that she lives up to that hype, and obviously she's coming off a huge injury, so that's going to take some time, but I think that's the piece that could set them apart this year in terms of like you haven't had that kind of size and post player in a UConn front court in many years now, and she could bring that.
All of that could come true. I think right now it's too pie in the sky. Like Lee Edwards was an All-American. That's a lot of production needing replacing. Sarah Strong's a very different type of player, but she might need to step in and be like an All-American as a freshman, which she can do. We've seen freshmen be All-Americans for, half a decade now. El Alfie's coming off, I think, the most severe injury a person can come off of, an Achilles tear. She's never played a minute of college basketball. Ice Brady showed flashes last year in the Big East tournament. She was big in that fourth quarter in the Final Four loss to Iowa. I need to see it before I can just crown them the number 2 team in the country. And then here's a question. This ensuing discussion is strictly as a basketball player. Why can you count on AZ Fudd?
I mean, it's fair. She's been injured so much of her career, so you kind of can't. But I mean, I think if you don't make assumptions assuming that people are going to be injured, but yeah, I mean, it's fair.
Yeah, she's out about the first month. She's one of the biggest names in the country. To this point, that's largely what she's been. Since 2019, so going back to high school, she's been healthy for 2 years. She tore her ACL as a junior in high school. She came back, played her senior year. She missed 11 games with a foot injury as a freshman. She missed 21 games over 2 separate knee injuries 2 years ago. She tore the same ACL she tore in high school last year. She's played 42 games in 3 years in college. like saying she's on the team, so UConn is a top 2 team. Again, it seems naive to just assume
that she'll be healthy. That's fair.
And frankly, when she's played, she's been fine. Fine. She hasn't been number 1 recruit in the country that's taken the world by storm.
I think there was a
doesn't need to be because they have Paige Beckers.
Yeah. There was a stretch when Paige was injured and she was healthy, which was a brief stretch, but where she was kind of playing at that level. But yeah, it's been a while since we've seen it.
She took over that Iowa game, right? Like that November Iowa game where they were down.
Yeah, that's the stretch I'm talking about. The brief stretch where she was healthy while Paige was injured. All
that said, continue.
No, I was going to say, the other thing we didn't talk about with them in their backcourt is you have KK Arnold and Ashlyn Shade back, who were both very solid in their freshman year. They're not Juju Watkins or Hannah Hidalgo, but they had very solid freshman seasons. So you get that back too. I think the talent's there in the backcourt. It's just what's going to happen in the front court.
For the love of God, stay healthy, which they're off to a bad start. Fudge out the first month. Aubrey Griffin's probably not going to come back till late December, January.
Yeah.
And Caroline Ducharme, I'm waiting for the announcement that she's done playing basketball. I assume she's out until she plays again.
Yeah, I wouldn't count on her showing up.
All that said, they have the best player in the country. Not going to get into a Paige versus Juju argument. If Killer Paige is Killer Paige, they can beat anyone on a given night. That's what it comes down to. So there's your UConn discussion. We will hit on who are the other 2 teams in that group. Notre Dame, Texas, we'll hit on them when we get to those conference previews. Continue down to what's number 4 on your top 5 storylines.
So we've got a lot of transfers again. We've got a lot of teams that are going to take time to gel, and we just kind of talked about that top tier, but it feels like there's a bit of a drop-off after that. I mean, like we said, Iowa State, NC State, kind of teams that might make that leap, but I feel like it's a little bit more of an even playing field after that, and there's a big opportunity for some of the mid-major teams that are bringing back a lot of experience to make statements early on in the season here in November, get those big non-conference wins, and that could pay off, I think, in March in terms of seeding, but also in March in terms of if the landscape stays similar, that they could make some noise in the tournament as well. Looking at like a South Dakota State, for example, that brings back most of their scoring from last year. It was a team that could make some noise. I think we saw the A10 be really good last year. Richmond brings back a lot. St. Joe's brings back a lot. So I'm excited to kind of catch some of those mid-major games as we get started here and see who makes a climb, especially because we got absolutely zero mid-major love in the preseason AP poll. There's not a single mid-major team on that list.
No, Gonzaga is your 1, 2, 3, 4, 6th team in the others receiving votes categories, followed by the aforementioned South Dakota State Jackrabbits. Shout out Fairfield. The Stags got 3 votes because they lost 2 games last year, 1 in the regular season. And then Princeton gets a lone vote, though they lost their best player, Caitlin Chen. As you heard Megan say, she's now a Husky up in stores. First bracketology. We got preseason bracketology Friday. Yeah. So you're going to wake up and this pod will be in your feed and you're going to listen to it on the way to work. And then you're going to check your email at work. And then you're going to go to head to herhoopstats.com and Megan Gauer will have you don't even need the season. Just simulate it all the way to whatever Selection Sunday is. And there's your top 68. Last top storyline.
We have to talk about the shakeup in the Big Ten because we've been talking about the Iowas and the Ohio States and the Marylands for so long there. And I think it's very clear this season that that conference runs through its newcomers, and that's UCLA and USC, which we've already talked about some here, but that's your new top of the Big Ten. And that is a big shift in mindset. And also just in conferences in general, too, you've got the shakeup in the SEC. Could someone like Texas challenge South Carolina for that SEC title that's kind of been theirs for so long? So I think the change up in the conferences is going to be a big change this year.
All right, so let's start our conference chats with the Big Ten. So we talked about the LA schools. So they're clearly 1A, 1B, it would seem. They won't finish third, I don't think. But, you heard of Iowa? Has anyone talked about Iowa? Well, they're unranked. Obviously, Caitlin Clark took them to a whole new stratosphere. They didn't make an Elite Eight in 2019. They made the second weekend in 2016. Megan Gustafson was a National Player of the Year. This is a good program. Was a good program. Will continue to be a good program as Lisa Bluter passes the torch to Jan Jansen. Megan, I think, finally likes Iowa because her favorite player is there. Lucy Olson. She's a Hawkeye.
Yeah, honestly, I was a little surprised to not see them ranked. I'm not like totally shocked because I think everyone recognizes that there's going to be a big drop off, losing not only Caitlin Clark but also Kate Martin and Gabby Marshall have been such kind of cornerstones of that team for a while now. But I do really like the Lucy Olson pickup. She, I don't know, second, third, something in scoring last season in the country. I think she fits into that. She's not going to be Caitlin Clark, but she fits into that kind of point guard role that they need to replace really well. And then you still have Hannah Stuelke. Like that's a pretty solid two players to start something off of. So we got a coaching change and stuff too. So a lot of change incoming, but I still think this is a good team.
Kate Martin isn't as difficult to replace as Caitlin Clark. Obviously, I mean, you're not going to replace Caitlin Clark with one person. Lucy Olson might come close to her in scoring. Like she might average 24, 25 a game. She's also not going to average 11 assists a game or whatever obscene number it was. Kate Martin, though, like you saw, she didn't expect to get drafted. It was the summer of Kate Martin. It was a great story of the WNBA. Like she's a WNBA player, which no one really took seriously until she played for the Aces and became a role player on one of the best teams in the league. So she's almost, and she's so many little things. Like go back to that Final Four game last year against UConn. It wasn't Caitlin Clark who made all the big plays down the stretch. It was one Hannah Stuelke who was the best big on the floor. And then Kate Martin just had 2 or 3 just dagger 10, 12 footers that just killed UConn. I think she's such a difficult player to replace as she might have been the heart and soul of the team. I think Caitlin Clark would have told you that. So it's a new era, but I'm not as down on Iowa as others. I think they're not going to go back and be in the national title game for the 3rd straight year. I think they will finish in the top 25, top 20. They might finish 3rd in the Big Ten because I'm looking at some of these other teams who are also, they're just not as good as last year. Indiana, Ohio State. I'm not, the polls and the rankings say as such. I'm not as high as on Ohio State. I know last year they were my darling. I'm not as high on them this year.
Yeah, I feel like they've just lost a lot of what made them what they were last year and the year before. I mean, you still have Cody McMahon. That's great. I don't feel like she maybe lived up to what everyone thought she was going to be last year, but she's going to be an upperclassman now. Maybe she takes a step forward. You still have Taylor Theory, but you lost a lot of this team. And yeah, I'm not that high on them either. I think we haven't seen enough from Cody McMahon for me to be like, Cody McMahon can make this team a top 10, top 15 team on her own.
You could make the case. Like I think there's more variance in this team than almost anyone in the country. Like if you told me that they have a highly rated freshman, Jordan Cambridge, who if she comes in and it's basically Hannah Hidalgo, Cody McMahon plays like a National Player of the Year candidate. The pieces like Chance Gray comes in from Oregon, she can score. You can make the case like all that gels, and they're terrifying in March with the way they play. If you told me that, like, yeah, I'd believe you. If you also told me, well, McMahon is still inconsistent, Cambridge is a freshman, which she's allowed to be, and they're more Maryland, Nebraska, Illinois than they are USC, UCLA, I'd go, yeah, that also makes sense to me. Like, there's just so much. The highs can be really high, and the lows can just be which I feel like you can't say about too many teams. What was the other team? Indiana. Yeah. They lost their most impactful player ever, probably in Mackenzie Holmes. They came tantalizingly close to knocking off South Carolina. They have one top 100 recruit coming in, and they have I think they have a lot of good pieces. They just no longer have an all-American piece like they had with Grace Berger 2 years ago, Mackenzie Holmes the last 2 years.
Yeah, this is a team that's lost a lot in the last couple of years, and they were able to recover somewhat from the Grace Berger loss last year. I don't think they were ever at the level they were when they had Grace Berger, but like they were still a very good team last year. I think the Holmes loss is going to be really hard to mask because I think a lot of what they were able to cover up from losing Berger last year was just the fact that Mackenzie Holmes was so good in the post, especially in the Big Ten. But you've got good pieces, but you don't have a great piece, and I think it's really hard to be like a top 15 type team without a great piece.
Yeah, like Chloe Moore McNeil is a very good distributor. Sydney Parrish and Yarden Garzone can get hot in a hurry. Just none of them are, that top 5, top 10 player caliber star. There's a giant logjam of teams in the middle of the Big Ten. I think Indiana will be there. Maryland's also there, a very new look Terps team. Cheyenne Sellers is back. She's an All-American caliber offensive talent. Now we'll see if all that portaling comes together for Brenda Fries.
Yeah, it's so hard to tell what to make of this team. They've brought in a ton of pieces. There's definitely talent here, but it's just so new. I don't know. I think they're going to be fascinating to watch.
They're big now. They're really big now. Sailor Poffenbarger, she's not bulky. Comes in from Arkansas. She was among the nation's best rebounders at Arkansas last year. Christina Dalsey, very good defender at Villanova. Amari DeBerry was a former 5-star, comes in from UConn. Mir McLean comes in from Virginia. If you go back to the 2021 UConn roster, they're all in College Park, baby. Amari DeBerry, Mir McLean, Sailor Poffenbarger. But they also bring in Kaylin Schmeichel. She averaged a double-double on a bad Rutgers team last year. That's a lot of height. So if nothing else, they're going to be difficult to deal with down low. Now it's a matter of, because that's a lot of names. That's not a ton of offense. Now they have Sellers, so that's a lot of scoring right there. But just, again, like the theme of the day, and it's going to be the theme of Welcome to College Basketball in 2024. Can you make it all work?
Yeah, exactly. That's the big question, and some of these teams will, and some of them will not, and that's going to be determine who's kind of a threat to be reckoned with in March.
The Big Ten, I feel like, has a lot of like 7 through 10 seeds.
Yeah.
Is that a little spoiler for Friday?
Yeah, I think that's about right. I'm looking at the list now. It feels like that. Yeah.
The other two that I have written down, Illinois, they're supposed to be good last year. They didn't wind up making the tournament. Disappointing. They do bring back their top 4 scorers, Makaira Crooks, Genesis Bryant, Kendall Bostic. That's a nice trio to start with to hopefully get back to the dance. And then my beloved Huskers, an NCAA tournament team that should be trying to get into the mix now for a top 16 seed. I'm not sure if they have the talent to do it, but last year they were just kind of hanging out in that, 7, 8, 9. I think they were an 8 seed, 9 seed. They were in the 8-9 game. I know that. Yeah. Can they take that step up despite losing Jazz Shelley to W? Because I think they might be more talented last year despite that loss.
Yeah, I think they're an interesting one. I think this middle of the Big Ten is going to just be fascinating because it's going to have a lot of seeding implications. And we said, UCLA, USC, that's the top, but whoever can be like the 3rd best, 4th best team is going to have a good case to climb up in that seeding rankings.
Yeah, Alexis Markowski could be an All-American. She averaged 16 and 10 last year. Natalie Potts, your Big Ten freshman of the year. And then they got a top 25 recruit, which Nebraska doesn't get too many. They got her to stay home, an in-state kid in Britt Prince. So they have talent. Now it's just a matter of, again, it's open outside of, again, the top 2 is pretty much set in the Big Ten. Beyond that, teams 3 through, if you throw Michigan State in there as well, 3 through like 10, mix it up, throw it in a bag, mix it up, shake it, see what comes out. The other major conference to transition, SEC. We talked South Carolina. We need to talk them again. They're good. There's your analysis, South Carolina, if you missed it the first time. Texas. Can they compete with South Carolina at the top of the SEC? Obviously they can. Will they?
I think they can. I think for them to do that, like Rory Harmon has to be healthy because she's another one that has really, really struggled with injuries the last few years. She's missed a lot of time, but I think we saw a Rory Harmon before she got hurt last year that was on another level. So I think her with Booker is going to be a great combination. They bring in Lila Filia from Michigan as well, who had a fantastic year last year. You bring back Taylor Jones in the front court. You've got
forget Shea Holly. Vic Schaefer shouted out Shea Holly.
Shea Holly's back. So yeah, you've got a lot of the pieces from what was a very good team without Rory Harmon last year. You're going to add Rory Harmon and then add those other pieces too. So I think this is a team that can be a top 2, top 3 team in the country.
People, I don't think, may not realize like how good Madison Booker was after Harmon went down. She's not a natural point guard. She plays on the wing. So now she gets to go back to her natural position on the wing. So you would expect her numbers, her overall numbers might decrease a little. The ball just won't be in her hand. So she's not going to, she might have as many points, maybe not as many assists, maybe more rebounds. But the point of the story is she's going to play in the spot that she's more comfortable playing in with Rory Harmon, who might not be, it might take her a month to ramp back up to the full speed of things, maybe even 2 months. But come February, come March, they have so much talent around. I think that they are a clear, like it's South Carolina deserves to be in its own tier until proven otherwise. Small gap, Texas, gap, everyone else in the SEC. Because Aaliyah Moore's back too. We didn't mention her name.
Yeah.
So that they're my preseason number 3. They might be number 2, like come December.
Yeah. I think they are a team that once they kind of get Harmon back up to speed and get in the flow of things, could be really, really good this year.
They also bring in a couple of big time recruits, Brianna Preston and Jordan Lee. So that's 6 players in the backcourt. Like their backcourt might be as deep as anyone's in the country. Even if it takes Rory Harmon a month, I think they have the talent around just to ease her back into it. Like the comp is what, Paige Beckers, who Gino tried to put her on a minutes restriction and it lasted like the exhibition. But Rory Harmon can play 15 minutes a night for 3 weeks because Booker and Layla Felia and Fresh Preston and Lee, like, and Shea Holly, they got it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, they're good. Another newcomer to the SEC, Oklahoma. Not the last time we'll say this in the SEC. I'm fascinated to see how this fast-paced offense matches up in the league.
Yeah, they do not. Texas fits the SEC style perfectly, right? Defensive-minded team fits right in.
I mean, Vic Schaefer came from the SEC.
Yeah, exactly. That makes sense. He knows what he's getting into. Yeah, this Oklahoma team does not fit the SEC profile, so it's going to be really interesting to see kind of what that looks like in SEC play. I think it's going to change things up a little bit. Excited for it. I mean, obviously the big story with this team is they get one of the best transfers in the portal this offseason, and Reagan Beers from Oregon State. Again, poor Oregon State, the biggest victim of the Pac-12 dismantling. But I mean, that's the story for this team, is they bring back a lot from last year, but then they add that post presence with Reagan Beers.
Yeah, everyone else is back. Skylar Van, did she win Big 12 Player of the Year last year? She's good. It doesn't matter.
Yeah,
she's really good.
Exactly.
Peyton Verhulst, Sahara Williams, Liz Scott is a name that you may not know. She was a 2-year starter, but she missed last year. She was hurt. They got Reagan Beers. Now, I think with Beers, they add a new dimension. Like last year, they had the capability of beating Texas twice. They also had the capability of losing to Southern at home. Because if the shots aren't falling, they're in trouble. Well, now with Beers and just so much experience back, I think now that they're able to adapt. Like they don't need to win a shootout, or they don't need to hit a bunch of threes. They have like a calming presence in Beers, who was an All-American boy. Oregon State, like we should talk about them as like a top 6 or 7 team.
I know. It's so
Instead,
sad.
they're scattered around the country. Now, for Oklahoma, like, yeah, they can win in different ways. Like they might have to bang bodies in the SEC. South Carolina, LSU, Ole Miss, Texas. They know how to beat Texas. They did it twice last year. Can they just do it night after night after night after night? They're going to get teams on a certain night. Like they're going to put up 98 points on someone you're not going to expect. Are you able to hang around and bang bodies for 2 straight weeks when you're playing South Carolina, LSU, and Ole Miss, and the game's in the 60s?
Yeah, I think that's going to be the adjustment. But like you said, they've played Texas. They've seen it in Texas. They've seen it. I feel like Baylor has played with that way at times. So like they've seen it. They haven't seen it every single night. And so that's going to be an adjustment.
Their only test in the non-conference is Louisville. And they only play Texas, South Carolina, LSU once each. So they could win a lot of games this year. And we might ask in February how good they actually are. But I could see them being like, how many games you play in the regular season? I could see them being like 25-5.
Yeah.
Just because of the way the schedule shakes out in the SEC, and then the non-conference, which you control, isn't the best. Speaking of bad non-conference, LSU. Shock among shocks. They don't play anybody in the non-conference except for Stanford, Stanford is the ACC SEC challenge, and Washington. They don't play anybody in the non-conference again. So they're going to be 19-0 heading to Colonial Life Arena on January 23rd. But give me your LSU takes.
I was going to say, where have we heard that tale before? It's happened a lot.
No Angel Reese, but this is an LSU team that, schedule aside, no reason this team can't match or surpass last year's team that went 31-6 and made an Elite 8.
Yeah, I agree. And I guess to give them a little bit of credit, they probably didn't think that Stanford was going to be the game that it's going to be this year.
Yes, but if they weren't in the ACC, they also wouldn't have gotten that Stanford game.
Yeah, that's true. But yeah, I mean, you have Anissa Morrow back, you have Michaela Williams back. You've got a lot of good talent back on the team, but I mean, the Angel resize hole I think is going to take them time to fill. And even though like Kaylee Van Lith never really gelled with that team, I feel like last year it was still someone that started every game. They've got a ton of talent. I think it's just another. We've said this like about 18 different teams, but how does it all come together?
I think it'll come together fine if Flau'jae Johnson, like I feel like she's on the
Yeah.
precipice of really just taking it to another level. She showed flashes last year. Anissa Morrow has been one of the most productive players in the country since the second she stepped foot on campus at DePaul, what now, 4 years ago. And Michaela Williams, right from the first game last year, she was pretty good against Colorado in a game. I think it was the Colorado game. There was one game where she was just better than everyone else. And it's like, oh, she is this good. Now, can Cheyenne Day Wilson become like an Alexis Morris from a couple years ago? The numbers between her and Morris are like eerily similar. They're very similar profiles of players that helped win the national title. Kaylin Gilbert comes in from Arizona. Jersey Wolfenbarger, that's an intriguing portal addition. She never fit in Arkansas. She's 6'5". She has guard handles. She transferred early last year. If someone can fix her, it might be Kim Mulkey. So they need depth. Last year, they basically played like 6-7 players once Samaya Smith went down. But I think the depth is the one piece that could do them in. But I might revise my start of the pod statement of if someone's going to jump into that like top 5, 6, I think it's LSU.
Yeah, the talent's certainly there. Like you said, all the names you just listed off, like that is a wealth of talent. Probably as much talent as on any of those other teams that we talked about in that top group. So it's just how does it all come together? Because it's not a ton of returning talent, but it is right there.
Kentucky. Weird that if you'd have told me in February of last year we're going to talk Kentucky, I'd have been like, yeah, no, that's a lie. How fast can Kenny Brooks turn it around? They're ranked in the preseason, and they won 12 games last year.
Yeah, I mean, you got Georgia Amore, so that's a huge piece of it. It's why they're ranked. I don't think they're going to be that good. It's like a lot of it kind of I think is going to look like Virginia Tech without Liz Kitley, and that's decent, but it's not going to be great. If Georgia Amore has like an All-American type season, they might be a top 25 team still at the end of the year, but I think he can turn around quickly, but I don't think they brought enough in yet to be like a powerhouse this year.
They brought in 9, 10, 11. They have 11 newcomers this year.
Yeah,
9
I mean,
they take away the Virginia Tech. So Amore, they also brought Clara Strack. I'm with you. I'm not bought in yet. They brought in. I'm always wary of bringing in high-scoring mid-major transfers and expecting them to just replicate it. Like Deja Fair at Syracuse is the outlier, not the rule. So Deja Lawrence is a good mid-major scorer at Charlotte. Jordan Obi was a good major scorer at Penn. Kiki Jefferson was a good mid-major scorer at James Madison, and Louisville wasn't a top 15 team last year. So I think they're closer to an 8 seed than they are a top 16 seed.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I mean, I think a lot of it's going to just be like if Georgia Amore is so good, maybe they move up, but I think that there's going to be a little bit of growing pains this year, and then as Kenny Brooks gets more players in there, they will become a top team.
That was fairly negative. They won 12 games last year. They will be much better than they were last year.
Yes, that's fair. They will be way better than Kentucky was last year. They're just not going to be a top 15 team probably this year.
However, they will be. Kenny Brooks has won. He won at James Madison. They were one of the best mid-majors in the country for years with Kenny Brooks there. He went to Virginia Tech, who basically had no semblance of women's basketball history of which to speak. They went to the Final Four. He will get Kentucky there. It might just not be in 24 or 25, and that's fine. It'll be faster than it would have been if this were a decade ago, and he didn't get to bring in 11 newcomers, but he will get them there. Rest of the SEC, let's talk Tennessee. Fascinated. Like if Oklahoma is they're a little bit different than the rest of the SEC and how they play offense. Well, Tennessee and Kim Caldwell, that's a lot different.
Yeah. I don't know what to make of this team. It's obviously just going to be a transition year for them, new coach. I mean, you still have a decent amount of talent, but
yeah, they got more on the roster than I thought.
Yeah, agreed. I feel like usually coaching changes, especially in today's world, a big sign of people on their way out, but they keep Jewel Spear, they keep Sarah Puckett, they keep
Julian Hollingshed.
Yeah,
They lost Kaya
Hollingshed.
Wynn. She was a nice role player. She blew her out Achilles last week. They brought in Samara Spencer from Arkansas. She's gonna fit in nicely. She's lightning fast, scoring guard. So they're just gonna try to run, score. Maybe we don't see it as much this year as they transition and just work with what you have. Come next year, come the year after, they're just if it works, they're gonna score 1 billion points, and they may not. They may give up. If they score 1,000,001 points, they might give up 1 billion. But she won a lot of games at Marshall, so it's fascinating. I don't know what to make of it.
Yeah.
Almost like we have to see them on the court and play before we can talk about it.
Yeah, exactly.
Can you separate Ole Miss, Alabama, and Vanderbilt? Because I can't. They're all tournament teams.
Yeah, they're all tournament teams. I don't know. I like this Alabama squad. I feel like they've just steadily gotten a little bit better every year. They have Sarah Ashley Barker back. I think they're going to be decent. I would say if I had to pick someone from that group to stand out, it'd probably be them. But I think they're all going to be tournament teams, but kind of similar to that group we talked about on the Big Ten, 7, 8, 9 seeds.
Yeah, I'm with you. I feel like asking them to beat South Carolina or Texas is probably too much. I think progress for them would be keep doing what they're doing and then go into that South Carolina game, that LSU game, a Texas game, and compete. Don't lose by 20 plus.
Yeah.
They lost to Texas last year in the tournament by 11. It never felt like they truly were ever going to win. Just the challenge is go out and do it. Go out and get someone you shouldn't. They have a fairly easy schedule minus they're at Texas, they're at Ole Miss, and they play South Carolina in January. That's a brutal 3-game stretch. And they close with LSU and Oklahoma. The other 27 games are all pretty manageable. So just go and surprise me in one of those games. And I think that'll be a major sign of progress for Christy Curry. Same with Vandy, to be honest. They made the tournament last year in Shea Ralph's third year. That's a team now. The goal before was basically, let's just win some games.
Mm-hmm.
Then it's, hey, let's get into the tournament. Now it should be, let's finish top half of the SEC. Let's finish top 6 in the SEC.
Yeah, actually, Vanderbilt's going to be my first college basketball game of the season because I'll be in Nashville next Monday. So I'm.
Who they got?
I don't remember who they're playing. Nothing.
Off to a bad start.
Yeah, nothing exciting in terms of their schedule. But 11 a.m. on Monday, so I'm starting my season right away.
11 a.m. Monday?
Yeah.
Are they the first game? I don't think the Paris games start then.
Yeah, they're playing Lipscomb. Well, it's
big game.
Yeah. 11 a.m. Central, I guess. So noon. So maybe the Paris game has started. Maybe the Paris game is at noon. Yeah.
Let's see. Let me check Lipscomb. 17-13 last year. Okay. Do you know Lipscomb's mascot?
I do not.
Well, that's good because neither do I. I'm trying to look it up, but it's not on their website. Lips. I feel embarrassed. I feel I should know this. The Bison. Okay. Lipscomb Bison. Vanderbilt Commodores. 11 a.m. Central Time at Memorial Gym. Megan Gauer will be there. Ole Miss. I'm lower on Ole Miss than most. They're tough. They're physical. They need to show me that they can score with any semblance of consistency, and they need to be at least they need to try to shoot the three. They were bottom 10 nationally, maybe bottom 5 in 3-point attempts. They just didn't do it. And you don't have to make 1 million threes to be a good team, but you need to make more than 2 a game. Yeah. KK Dean should help. One person does not an offense make, at least no offense. KK Deans is a nice player. I think Ole Miss is ranked in the preseason.
Yeah.
Yes, they're ranked 20th.
Yeah.
I'm not as high on them as others until they prove to me that they can consistently score 65, 66, 67 points against higher echelon teams.
Yeah, exactly. I think you have to be able to score to be a top 25 team. The defense will get them a good amount of wins. It'll make them a tournament team. It might make them upset someone in the first or second round come the tournament, but to really be a top 25 team, you've got to be able to score the basketball.
You want to go? They open, by the way, with USC, so we'll see.
Oh yeah,
we'll see in
That'll
game
be a fascinating first game.
Is that one of the Paris games? It might be one of the Paris games.
Is it? I just tried to Google which ones they were. Yes, it is. USC and Ole Miss is the Paris game. That and Louisville, UCLA.
I'm more interested in Ole Miss, USC. they're both interesting. I'm going to watch both regardless, but still, those are two games that they're probably like 10 to 15 point wins for the favorites.
Yeah.
But I'll watch them both regardless. You want to talk ACC or Big 12?
Let's do ACC first.
We talked Notre Dame a little bit. Highest ceiling of any team. Not many guard duos in the country can provide just the total output, points, assists, rebounds, defensive capabilities of Hannah Hidalgo and Olivia Miles. And I'm willing to give Olivia Miles, I'm willing to give Notre Dame basically a November pass as they ease Miles back in. We haven't seen her since late February or early March of 2023.
Late February,
So
February
hopefully,
26th of
like you think, as
2023.
opposed to most ACL injuries, like we're not going to see Izzy Fudd for a month. Or Rory Harmon, we might not see her full go until, I don't know, December. Olivia Miles, I would imagine, is probably full go.
Yeah,
from the get-go.
From timeline-wise, at least she should be, but we'll see. I mean, it's still, regardless, it's still going to take a little bit to get back into gameplay when you haven't played a game in that long. I think it's going to take a couple games, but I think by December they'll be hitting a stride probably. I would say also too, like, yes, the backcourt duo of Miles and Hidalgo, but the trio too, because you had Sonia Cintron in there too, and she's just been so good for them as well. Like, that is just a fantastic backcourt.
This is a good problem to have. How does Noelle Ivy split that? Like, only Caitlin Clark had a higher usage rate last year than Hannah Hidalgo. Miles was around 25% 2 seasons ago. Hidalgo, for context, last year was over 30. And then you have Citron, who averaged 17 points last year. Like, that's a lot of shots to divvy between 3 guards, 2 of whom are used to having the ball in their hand basically every possession.
Yeah, I think that's going to be interesting to see how they navigate that to start, but I feel like they'll figure it out.
I think they will too. You said you were concerned about the front court. I'm intrigued by the front court. Maddie Westbeld should miss the start of the year with a foot issue. That's a blow to the front court. I think they have a lot of potential though. After last year, like, they weren't a great rebounding team last year. I don't think they'll be like South Carolina, UCLA good in the front court, but they don't need to be. I think if they're a solid B in the front court with that backcourt, like, they brought in Liza Carlin from Marquette. They have a top 5 freshman coming in, and Kay, I think her last name is Koval. I'm willing. I mean, not to say it can't get worse, because yes, it can get much worse. They were very good last year. I think there's only room to go up in that front court compared to the upper echelon of teams, and I think that they can do it.
Yeah, and they also added Leota King too from Pitt, who averaged, I think, a double-double for Pitt last year. Not that Pitt is great by any means, but still a player that, played in the ACC and was able to average those type of numbers. So I think there's a lot of talent there that they've brought in. It's just a matter of does it fit together and does it work?
I think it works. I coming in, I was going to convince myself that NC State was the best team in the ACC. I've talked myself back into Notre Dame, who should be. I mean, I don't think it's so far that, Notre Dame's going to run away with the conference, but I think they're the best team. But NC State, they're not the highest ranked team in the preseason. We did not talk about the Wolfpack in last year's preseason show. Then they went out and beat UConn at home and pretty much lived in the top 10 the rest of the year and made the Final Four. They're not off anyone's radar this year. So the challenge is that you're not taking anyone by surprise. They're really talented. Really talented, I think. They might have like the second best backcourt in the country talented. That's how much I think of that trio of guards. Maybe third. Texas, Notre Dame, NC State, and South Carolina. All right, they're top 5. What are your thoughts on the Wolfpack?
Yeah, you bring back Sanaya Rivers, you bring back Zoe Brooks, you bring back Isaiah James. Like, that is quite the place to start from. Obviously, that trio was so big for them last year. You're going to have another year under Zoe Brooks' belt. She was just a freshman last year. Madison Hayes too, I didn't mention her, but like, was also really solid for them last year. So a really strong backcourt, like you said. I think the giant question is in the front court, though. You lost River Baldwin. You lost kind of what you had there last year. So it's a matter of what they can get going. They
have a lot of size. It just isn't proven size.
Yeah. And I feel like they lost, I'm blanking on the name, someone last
Amy
week.
Collins.
But to injury last week too, they lost someone.
Oh, did they? Oh, I missed that news.
Yeah, someone in the front court, and I'm trying to look up who it was.
I see a lot of River Baldwin injuries from last year, so you
Yeah,
lost me.
I saw something on Twitter, but
We'll look at
I'm forgetting
Well,
who it
effort,
was.
but they do have apologies if any of these players are the injured one. Maddie Cox, 6'2". She only played 10 minutes a game last year. They have a graduate student, Lizzie Williamson, is 6'5". Mallory Collier, 6'3", but they also played sparingly last year. They have a grad transfer, Caitlin Weimer, was 6'4". She averaged a double-double at Boston University. Big step from the Patriot League to the ACC. They have a couple of freshmen, 6'5" and 6'6", coming in that aren't highly decorated, though. Tilda Trigger was great at the FIBA under-20 championships. But like, there's a lot of unproven pieces. You don't need 6 of those out of 6 to hit. If you can get 2 of those 6 to hit, you're onto something here. So they're putting all the pieces together. Now, I just listed 6 players. Can you get 2 of them to repeat what Baldwin and Collins did? And you can very easily get back to a Final Four. But we're going to learn about the Wolfpack quickly. They play South Carolina in Charlotte on November 10th. Is that Sunday? Play them 2 Sundays from now.
Great the way to open the season.
Duke, we don't ever have to speak about the last game they played. The Sweet 16 lost to UConn. It didn't happen. The Huskies skipped over the round of 32 into the Elite Eight. We don't need to talk about what happened after they beat Ohio State in the round of 32. People are expecting a big jump now for the Blue Devils. Are you one of those people?
I think it's a young team, so it's hard to say. I mean, they've got a lot of talent on the roster, that's for sure. But they bring back Reagan Richardson, who was fantastic last year, so I think that's going to help them make a jump forward. Theoretically, all that freshman class they had last year that was so good should make a leap in their sophomore seasons, but I feel like we'll see what happens. I'm not entirely sold. Again, someone's got to learn how to score the basketball.
They are a better version of Ole Miss.
Yeah.
Like, I don't question the defense. I don't question the toughness. I don't question the rebounding. They were 113th in scoring offense. They're not going to run it up and down. Like, they're never going to finish in the top 10. They just don't play. They don't play that pace. But they lost 6 times last year when they held opponents under 65 points. That includes the Sweet 16 loss to UConn. A team that good, if you hold, with very few exceptions, like UConn, like South Carolina, if you hold anyone else pretty much to under 65, you should win if you're a top 10 team. 97 times out of 100. And I just don't think Duke is there offensively to be quite there. They're in the mix. They should host because they're just too talented defensively, and they have just enough, I think, on offense compared to Ole Miss to not be a top 16 team. But I just don't think that they're going to make that. I think their ceiling is like 12th or 11th as opposed to Final Four.
Yeah, agreed. Unless someone kind of emerges as an ability to score the basketball at a high level, I think that's the case.
A couple other ranked ACC teams. North Carolina, I don't know what to make the heels. The Deja Kelly transfer to Oregon. Based on what I heard in the summer, that was a split that benefited all parties involved. But they have a lot of experience. Alyssa Utsby and Lexi Donarski are 5th years. They have a size and senior Maria Gakdang. They have a couple of highly touted freshmen coming in. They have a nice blend of youth and experience. I guess it comes down to, do they have that number 1 star to lift them from that middle of the pack in the ACC up a level towards the top?
Yeah, I think that's the question. And can they be consistent too? Because I feel like this team, the consistency has always been an issue. They show flashes where they're great, and then they show flashes where it's hard to watch. So can they've solved that problem? Maybe some changes, and then, like you said, with Kelly being gone, maybe that helps some, but they haven't been able to find a consistent outing, I feel like, since the last 2 years.
They play UConn in 2 weeks in Greensboro. For some reason, that game's a quote-unquote neutral site, an hour from campus. Go back to last year, NC State. No one talked about them. Beat UConn at their place and got that profile boost. North Carolina got UConn kind of coming to their place, but not really. Follow that replica in Tar Heels. Nah, I don't think that's going to happen. But they're going to be, again, I think if you had to make me choose, like, there's Notre Dame, NC State. There's Duke kind of alone in 3rd, and then North Carolina might be the best of the rest. Like, Louisville kind of drifted in obscurity last year. They lost as a 6th seed to Middle Tennessee State in the tournament. They have some talent back. I don't know. They went 2-6 against teams that turned out to be 6 seeds or higher. Like, they beat the teams they should, and they lose to the teams they shouldn't for the most part. And I feel like that's Louisville, and I
Yeah,
feel like that's going to be them again this year.
I
Like we're
agree.
not we're not going to talk about them a whole lot, but they're not like they're going to make the tournament. I think fairly comfortably.
Agreed. You still have Jeff Walls there, so I think things are going to be fine. Like the sky's not falling, but they're also not going to be a top 10 team.
Now they open with UCLA and they play Kentucky, Oklahoma, and UConn in the non-con. If you win one or two of those, let's talk.
Yeah.
Yeah. If you go to Paris and beat UCLA, we will talk about
yes.
Louisville, probably for most of the year. Florida State is a top 5 chaos team in the country. Like every game, they could finish 100 to 99 and flip a coin as to whether they score the 100 or the 99. And they're super fun. And Sanaya Latson is one of the best pure scorers in the country. And they'll be on the fringes of the rankings all year. And there's also the possibility that they blow a 20-point lead at halftime to Syracuse and collapse after that. Because that's what happened last year when I was ready to crown them. And I was 20 minutes away from doing that. And then they blew the lead to Syracuse and they just fell off the face of the earth after.
Yeah, high variability team. Tanaya Latson is so much fun to watch, though. So glad we get to watch her again. But yeah, I mean, I don't think this team is going to be a top team this year. They're probably a tournament team, but that's about it.
In the history of podcasting, it doesn't go back that far. Especially women's basketball podcasting. No podcast for a preseason preview has ever gone over an hour without the word Stanford Cardinal. Here we are. Your Hall of Fame coach is gone. Tara's gone. Kate Pay was the obvious replacement. She's an excellent decision. Good luck. 3 players last year averaged more than 7 points a game. They are gone. You crossed the country 6 times. They will take a cross-country flight and come home. There's a higher threshold to get folks in academically. I don't know if they have NIL. The days of Stanford being a power, I think, are going to end rapidly. Like we saw Tennessee, obviously they've fallen off since Pat. I don't think it wasn't as precipitous, I think, as this will be. I don't think Stanford is going to be a factor at any point this year. And that's sad.
Yeah.
Because it's largely not their fault.
Yeah. No, it's not their fault, but yeah. I mean, they didn't retain any of the top players from last year's team. And then with the coach change and what they have left, I can't see them being competitive with the top of the ACC at all.
I think they'll make the tournament.
Yeah, probably.
Probably.
Yeah, I think they could be a bubble team, which is uncharted territory for Stanford. When's the last time we talked about Stanford being a bubble team? Probably never. I think they probably make the tournament. There's probably enough there to make the tournament, but yeah, it's going to be a very different year than what Stanford is used to.
This year, they have to travel to Indiana and back. That's a good non-conference game. They have to go to LSU and back for the ACC Challenge. Then they have to, fast forward, they have to go to SMU and then 3 days later, play at Clemson. So you're flying from California to Texas to South Carolina and back. Then they'll come home and then they'll fly back cross-country to Winston-Salem to play Wake Forest and Durham. Then they will fly back home to California. And then fast forward to February, they will travel to Notre Dame and then travel to Louisville and then fly back home for a couple of weeks. And then they'll fly across the country to go to Blacksburg and Charlottesville. And then they'll fly back home. And then they'll fly back across the country to Greensboro for the ACC tournament. Tell me that is sustainable.
It's not. This is like a case where a decision has been made because of football and no one gave 5 minutes of thought to what that meant for every other student athlete at those schools.
Yeah, like every Big Ten and ACC coach has been asked in football, like, oh, Miami had to go to Cal and play at 10:30 on a Saturday. Like, yeah, that sucks. They're going to take a charter.
Yeah.
And they only have to do it like 3 times a year at absolute most. And that's just a one-off. Like every other sport is going to live on an airplane for 4 months a year. It's wild. Virginia Tech, again, this is probably the only time we talk about Virginia Tech this year. Kenny Brooks is gone. I don't think they're going to be that good. I trust Megan Duffy.
Yeah, I like the hire, but it's
kind of like Kenny Brooks. Like she'll have that program back in the upper echelon of the ACC sooner than later. It just won't be this year.
Yeah, exactly. They don't have the pieces there this year, but like what you built at Marquette was really solid. You're going to have more resources at Virginia Tech than you did at at Marquette. They'll get there. It's just not going to be this year.
Do you know where Marquette was predicted to finish in the preseason in the Big East?
I
Now
think
that she's gone,
last or second to last, like very low.
second to last,
Yeah.
10th out of 11. That's the impact that Megan Duffy had. Now, obviously, because of that, they lost Liza Carlin, a bunch of other players, but they were second or third, and now they're expected to finish in the bottom of a conference that, frankly, isn't any good outside of UConn and Creighton.
Great.
That leaves us with the Big 12. The Arizona schools are in. Colorado and Utah are in. I think this is the most wide open conference. Like, go through every conference. There's a clear-cut leader or two leaders in every league, except for this one.
Yeah, I don't know that I'd fully put West Virginia there, but there's 3 teams that can win this conference.
Okay, so who's the 3?
Kansas State, you got Aoka Lee back. You got a lot of pieces from that team back. I mean, you were a 4-seed, top 16 team last year. Bring pretty much everything back. We've talked a little bit about Iowa State already, but I mean, Audie Crooks was so phenomenal to finish out the year last year. They're a really exciting team. And then a Baylor team that I feel like just keeps kind of like flying under the radar a bit, but like gave USC a hard time in the tournament last year, has some really solid pieces, has some experience. I like this Baylor team too.
Iowa State is my Ohio State this year. So they're my preseason bay. I was disappointed with them earlier in the year at Ohio State. They turned it on. They got up to number 2 in the polls. They went out with a whimper. Well, the Cyclones don't think they're going to be disappointing as Ohio State was early on. And I don't think they're national title favorites, but I love watching them. Audie Crooks was so good in March last year. So good. She and Addie Brown are only sophomores. I might be jumping in a year too soon with them. I don't know. Emily Ryan's there as well. She's a veteran presence as a 5th year who have the ball in her hands a lot. I don't know if they're the 8th best team in the country. They probably aren't. I take NC State over them right now. But I think they're like Colorado-y. They'll get a lot more attention than normal for what's been a good program. And I think they're going to surprise people. Despite having a high preseason ranking, I'm still not sure your casual fan realizes just how good Iowa State is.
Yeah. Yeah, I feel like they came on the scene a little late last year too, right? Like they really started making the names for themselves in the end of the Big 12 season, Big 12 tournament where
were they bubbly until the end and then they just started ripping off wins? Or
yeah, kind of. Okay. They were bubbly, then started winning at the end of the regular season, give Texas that run for their money in the Big 12 tournament last year in that final game, and then of course the overtime game with Stanford in the second round of the tournament that they lost by, I mean, Audie Crooks with 40 points or something in the first round of the NCAA tournament, just like exploded onto the scene. But yeah, it was like they kind of came on late, so I don't know that everyone was paying attention to them.
Baylor, you were on fraud alert all year last year with them, and you were basically right. And then, of course, they went out and they got a good matchup, which, hey, take advantage of the draw you're given. They beat a Liz Kitley-less Virginia Tech team to make the Sweet 16. I think they have the best backcourt in the league. They have Jada Walker, Sarah Andrews, Little Beige Bugs, all back. Bella Fauntleroy is back. Aronette Vonleh is a good portal piece from Colorado. Because otherwise I'd be worried about the front court. They didn't really have much of a front court, and they still really don't without her, at least not one with any discernible size. They have a couple of 6'3" players, but neither did much last year. So Vonleh, I think, might be one of the more valuable pieces that people don't realize out of the portal, just given what else Baylor has in the front court. Because that addition now, like they turn a ginormous red, giant flashing sign, warning, 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 into it's a problem, but it's been addressed.
Yeah, exactly. I think it's a huge pickup for them. Maybe not one of the biggest names that was coming out of the portal to most people, but just the perfect fit for what this team needed. And now you have a really experienced team too. I think that's the other thing that stands out to me about this squad is mostly upperclassmen. That's probably going to be that starting lineup. You know, Sarah Andrews is her 5th year. Bella Fauntleroy is now a junior. Little Paige Bugs is now a junior. So they're an upperclassman based team, and outside of Vonleh have all been playing together for a few years now too. And I think that could bode well for them, especially early on, November, December, when that's not the case for a lot of other teams.
And then K-State not ranked the highest in the AP poll, but they were the preseason favorites in the Big 12 as, I don't know who votes on it, probably the coaches. I think that's right. One of the bigger surprises last year, I thought they would just be a fun team, but one that wouldn't make much noise. And They flew a little too close to the sun. They got as high as what they were 20-1. They were ranked, I think, second in the country for a
Yeah.
week, and then they finished. They lost 8 of their last 14 games. Her hoop stats had them ranked as the 10th best defense last year. I think that's the biggest key. They were 70th the year before. Now no one's going to take them by surprise. Everyone's back, so you just that alone, you think they're going to be better than last year. I still think, I don't know. Like
Yeah,
I
I
don't
don't.
see them cracking into that South Carolina, USC, UCLA, like that upper echelon. I think their ceiling is probably a step behind that, but I think their floor is like super. Their floor is like Sweet 16 good. Their ceiling might be Elite 8 though. Like I just don't think I don't see them. They beat Iowa once last year, but I don't see them beating a South Carolina.
Yeah, I agree. I was trying to figure out why it is, but I feel like a lot of times with a team like this that brings everything back, that was a top 15 team last year, you'd be like, oh, they're going to be really good this year. And like, they're going to be really good, but I just don't think they have you need to be a top tier team. I think, like you said, their ceiling is kind of similar to what it was last year, or 3 seed, 4 seed. You're going to be a second weekend team, sure, but you're probably not making fun of 4.
I think if I'm going to be wrong about anyone, I think it might be K-State. I just have a
That's
hunch that I'm just talking myself out of something that I'm just that I think I see, but I don't see. I think K-State. I don't know. As I talk to myself, I might just talk myself out, and K-State might be
Yeah, I
might be
mean, they
better than
made
I think.
such a big leap with their defense last year. Like, if they
Yeah.
can fine tune that a little bit more, like, could they get there? Sure. I don't know. I don't see it, but it doesn't mean it can't happen.
West Virginia will find out how far a second round tournament loss by an 8 seed can get you reputation wise because they're ranked in the preseason. They nearly knocked off Iowa. JJ Quinterly is back. They're going to grind you down. They are kind of like Duke, kind of like Ole Miss. I think they're my idea of what a team like that wants to be, where they can score a little bit. Like Quinterly can get the ball in the hoop. They went through a stretch where they did it a bunch last year against middle, lower tiered Big 12 teams. Now the goal is, can you score 70? Like they only hit 70 3 times in the last 11 games. And the quality opponent picked up in your final however many games of the season. Can they just be more consistent offensively? Because if they can, I don't think they're too far away. Like you're probably right. They're probably right below that top 3. They're not far away from that top 3.
Yeah, I agree. I think if they can find a way to score more, like you said, they're close. It's just that's what's going to separate them for now, and to make that leap. If they figure it out, they can be there.
All right, rapid fire. A couple more teams in the Big 12. Thoughts on TCU? They got big names.
Yeah,
Big
it's
names.
fascinating. I mean, Sedona Prince has to stay healthy. I feel like you need the front court presence, and that's someone that has not been able to stay healthy at all. I mean, you got Haley Van Lith. Like, I think it's hard to count out a team that has Haley Van Lith. I realized that like the LSU experiment with her didn't work, but I think this is a better role for her. She's probably going to be the star of this team. It's going to be more where she's comfortable. I feel like over the summer playing in 3-on-3, she kind of got her edge back a little bit. I feel like she didn't really have that at LSU. I think we saw that some this summer. So I don't know. I don't know what to make of them, but I'm going to keep an eye on them because I think she's enough of a reason to keep an eye on them.
I agree, and they were so decimated by injuries last year. Like nothing I've ever seen. They literally had tryouts and had to sign 3 players off campus as walk-ons, and they played. Can't be that bad this year. Impossible to be. 2 other newcomers who gained a lot of talk last year. I'm not sure how much this year. Utah lost a star in Alyssa Peely. Gianna Neepkins is back. She was injured last year. She's an all Big 12 caliber player. The top 4 behind Peely are back. They were a deeply flawed team, though, with Peely. Without her, I think they're just in that mix of 8-9 seeds that kind of quietly go about their business that we don't like. They don't generate a lot of hype all year, but they'll make the tournament comfortably. That's where I see them.
Yeah, I agree.
Colorado, Vonleh, we talked about her. She's gone. Jalen Sherrod, Quay Miller, Maddie Nolan, they're all gone. Frida Foreman is there. She's a nice player. Might be a 1-year bolt of lightning after last year for the Buffs.
Yeah, I think this team is going to struggle this year. Like you said, Frida Forda is still there. Weta is still there, but I just don't think you're going to have the pieces around them that made them so successful.
I'm sorry if we did not talk about your team. We talked about a lot of teams in the last hour and 14 minutes. If we missed yours like we did NC State last year, well, then go out and beat someone you shouldn't, and we'll talk about you a lot in the coming weeks. We'll close things out. Gave Megan some homework. She gave you her top 5 storylines. Also asked for All-Americans, which we publicized on our little Google Doc here. We did not publicize to each other our Final Four predictions. So, Megan, give me who is going to be your All-American first team come whenever they announce it. March, April, whenever.
Yeah, so I think the first 3 are going to come as zero surprise. Juju Watkins is going to be there. Paige Beckers is going to be there. Hannah Hidalgo is going to be there. Those 3, I mean, All-Americans last year. I think everyone expects them to be there. I have Rory Harmon on here. I know, I think the AP poll or the AP one has Madison Booker. Obviously, there's a good case for that. I think people forget how good Harmon was a little bit before she got hurt last year. She was averaging like 14 points and 8 assists. But I mean, Booker's a great choice too. I think it's splitting hairs on which one of those could be the best player on Texas.
That's 4.
4, sorry. And then my last one, yeah. My last one is, I feel like it's a wild card on the last one. I don't know. I feel like there's like 3 or 4 clear ones. And then I have Lauren Betts as my last one with the assumption that UCLA is going to figure it out and she is going to be the player that she can be. But I think we'll see on
that. You and I are similar. We have the first 3. We went on limbs with Beckers, Watkins, Hidalgo. I have Madison Booker. I just think Harmon, like the whole season matters, especially with voters, and you have to pass the quote unquote eye test. And if they just ease her into the year and she's not great from the get-go, I think that might be in the back of people's heads. That doesn't mean she's any less talented and not All-American caliber. I just don't think she'll need to be full bore 36 minutes a night from November onward. I have Audie Crook as my 5th. Maybe it's just recency bias. She was so good in the NCAA tournament, but a lot more eyeballs on Iowa State. This shouldn't matter, but it oftentimes does. Iowa State's going to be better than a 7 seed this year. They're preseason top 10. If she doesn't have to put up 40 points every night, obviously, but if she can just be what her talent suggests she can be, and Iowa State does live in that top 15 for the entire year, it's probably because of her, largely because of her. I think she'll get rewarded as such. But again, yeah, it's a toss-up. So I have 4 sophomores and a 5th-year senior. That's my first team All-American. Okay. Final 4 predictions. Last year, unbeknownst to each other, you and I had the same Final 4. And then I think we only got 1 right. I think it was UCLA, wrong. UConn, right. LSU, wrong. And Ohio State, wrong. So we didn't do great last year. We're going to do better this year. Who you got in your Final 4?
Yeah, well, I'm going to put South Carolina in there. I'm not going to leave them off. I think South Carolina, UConn, USC, and Notre Dame. It's not very inventive, but
mine is also not inventive because we got 3 of the same, and then I swapped out Notre Dame for Tejas, Texas. Like you said,
get more inventive come March when there's more data to back it up. But
well, for right now, like there's a gap there between 6 and everyone else. I think.
Yeah.
Until a team like NC State last year or someone else comes in, it might be NC State this year, who knows, and just proves that they belong in that upper tier. We're still not at that point quite yet. We're starting to get there where safe is generally right when you're talking Final 4.
Yeah.
Like you don't see 9 seeds making runs. You've seen them close, like Miami a couple of years ago. Generally speaking, if it's outside of a top 2 seed, like Arizona is an outlier. US or LSU a couple of years ago, they were a 3, largely because of their schedule. If they played 1 or 2 better teams, they're probably a 2, maybe a 1. But yeah, if you drift outside the top 7 or 8 teams, good luck. I will say I have one final note. I was yelled at by a friend because if you're watching, I'm wearing my Hofstra shirt, Roll Pride, class 2014. Emma Von Essen and Chloe Sterling. Remember the names. The Pride won not many games last year. They're going to win more this year. There's my shout out at the end. That is the first and last time we will talk about the Hofstra Pride, probably on this show. That's all I got. So again, we will do this every Friday now. We will not be taking a hiatus until January. So every Friday, download, listen, rate, subscribe. check out herhoopstats.com if you are not a subscriber. Please do. All the information you could possibly ever need on every player, whether you're looking up South Carolina or my Hofstra Pride. You can learn about Malaysia Full Wiley or Emma Von Essen and get all of their numbers and more. And you can read Megan's bracketology, which will hit Friday. Meg, what else you got coming down the pike?
We'll have an article with the bracketology on Friday as well. Otherwise, stay tuned. I don't know. I'm still figuring it out, but stuff is coming.
Fake it till you make it. Awesome. Well, everyone, thank you for tuning in. We'll talk to you next week.